All right, board fam, Cope Watch continues. We are officially on Cope Watch with a lot of these channels, with a lot of these guys over the Odyssey. It smashed it this weekend. It's doing incredible. It looks like it's going to have a good second weekend. So now the goalposts are shifting. Things are moving. I was looking over on Twitter, the cesspool of the internet, and apparently a bunch of people on Twitter now are saying, oh, it's not going to be good if it doesn't hit $1 billion or XYZ, a million different hoops it has to jump through because every single other metric they tried to lay out didn't work, and they're still coping about it. They're still upset about it. This is a Nerdrotic video. We're going to watch this one. It's his review of the Odyssey, or I think it's like he's done 3 or 4 of them, but this is the 26-minute one. We're going to watch this one together, see how far we can get through it. I actually wanted to watch the Critical Drinker video because after Ben Shapiro came out and made his video, and we have other people on the right side now that are sort of being soft on this movie, I'm really curious to see what Critical Drinker is going to do. If it's anything like we've seen from a lot of these other guys, he's going to give it like a 5 out of 10, say it's just a meh movie. It's just a middle of the road movie, which to me is a concession that they fucked up. It's a concession that they were wrong. And so the best thing they can do is just go, it was just okay. And that's where we are in this. But we got a couple videos we're going to watch today. This is the first one. It's Nerdrotic. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Force behind it.
Emma was my driving force behind it, so she could speak to that.
Well.
What's been your Odyssey in terms of fighting for your identity or your Hollywood career?
Well, you know, it's always been a battle. I mean, you know, Hollywood is not the most accepting place.
No Greek xeno.
When I think about equality or equity, I don't think about taking from a male figure. I think about getting what is due to me.
If you don't create great Latin roles,
I love the clown music in the background, you know, the silly, funny music with them saying these things, considering the movie smashed it this weekend. So if this isn't Cope, I don't know what is. Like, quite literally, this is him sort of making fun of all of the stuff that they said before the movie came out. But guess what, fam? It didn't affect the fucking movie. None of this affected the movie. None of the advertising, none of the marketing, none of the earned media, the red carpets, none of this shit affected the movie. So it's quite funny to me that you're still using it as a gotcha. A gotcha to what end? To what end is this a gotcha?
how are we going to get nominated?
In history, women have been vilified, whether you're a midwife, whether you're, a herbalist, whether you're a healer, whether you're just in tune with the moon. Like, women have just been vilified throughout history.
Especially being a Latin man, I want to be the one who has the agency. So I choose the...
I would go as far to say that this segment of the video was already made prior to the recording of the review. I feel like this was already made, so they're just running with it because they had already done it. They'd been on flop watch for this for so long, they thought it was going to flop, so they went ahead and made this little montage of clips in preparation for that, because it don't make no sense. It makes no sense at all to use it now when the movie came out. It is well received in every fucking regard, whether it be money, critics, fans, cinema score, whatever. It's been well received. This is crazy.
Roles I want to be, and I want to be as varied and as complex as Latin people can be.
Looking at nature as if it's some sort of cis heteropatriarchal structure is absurd, and that this gender binary that we've created is nothing but a quaint little myth.
Dumb bitch.
I'd be like, so Homer, how do you feel about this screen time given to these women, considering how little you spend?
This is such tasty cope. This is such tasty cope, everybody. Wow. They lost so hard, and they're still trying to push this narrative. They're still trying to push this.
With them. Okay.
Nerdrotic.com.
Greetings, you over 1 million hellions and the 40% who haven't subscribed yet. It is without a doubt Christopher Nolan is Hollywood's last movie star and the last director where every time he releases a film, it is a genuine event. He's the only director in Tinseltown who could put butts in seats on his name alone. The only other name that comes close is old Jimmy Cameron, and he's only made 3 movies in the last 17 years about indigenous blue furry space people that are a practice in misanthropy. While they do make a lot of money, I think they're awful. Simply put, Christopher Nolan is the king of Hollywood. Yet it's been quite an odyssey to get to his latest film, The Odyssey.
So we're establishing he's the king of Hollywood. He brings people in, he gets butts and seats. So any argument that these guys have that Christopher Nolan is doing things to gain grace doesn't hold up. it doesn't hold up to scrutiny when you're establishing here that Christopher Nolan calls the shots. He doesn't bend to Hollywood, Hollywood bends to him. So if in this video, if they go back on the whole thing, oh, he's doing it for DEI points or whatever, that doesn't make any sense as a claim when you're establishing that Christopher Nolan is the big shot in Hollywood. That whole excuse makes no sense.
One that was unexpected when it was announced in December of 2024. I would argue it was met with overwhelming excitement. Certainly there were some questions, even from his biggest fans, about Christopher Nolan taking this big swing and adapting something that is the foundation of all of Western civilization storytelling, a mythological tale that's essentially epic fantasy, which could be perceived as out of his wheelhouse. But those were far and few between, and quite frankly, normal questions and nothing you would consider controversial until a month later when the casting was announced. And when it was originally announced, nobody really knew who was playing who, but in particular, Travis Scott, Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o, and Elliot.
Zendaya, it's not Zendaya. You purposely mispronounce people's names when you don't like them. It's purpose.
Casting was announced. And when it was originally announced, nobody really knew who was playing who, but in particular, Travis Scott, Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o, and Elliot Page. Raised more than a few eyebrows, but didn't hurt the excitement.
It's funny, the characters of color and the trans person. In a movie about Greek people, the only ones that I guess were controversial were the ones that aren't white. But it's not about race, even though Helen of Detroit is clearly a racist name for Lupita. I've seen memes of her with buckets of chicken and gold teeth and all this other stuff, but it's not about race. It's just about the fidelity of a movie based on Greek mythology. The fuck out of here.
For the film, considering 70mm screens sold out a year in advance. All was quiet for a while until the red flags went up when we found out who was playing who, including...
What are the red flags? Tell me what the red flags are for a movie that overperformed on its opening weekend. Substantiate this claim. A red flag would be a negative. It would be something that is detrimental, something that is bad, something that is harmful. You can't be like, oh, the people of color and the trans person casting was a red flag. The movie goes on to be well received across the board, including financially. So the argument doesn't make sense. That's not what a red flag is, unless you're an incel racist.
Zendaya playing Athena and Lupita Nyong'o playing Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. But the most controversial casting of them all is Elliot Page, who was rumored to play Achilles, which ended up not being true.
But it didn't stop y'all from going hard on it for months. So a red flag casting that wasn't true caused Elliot to deal with months of transphobia from a bunch of idiots on social media who are more focused on the outrage cycle than they are the actual movie itself. I believe a lot of people that engage with this, I don't have proof of it. It is a vibes-based statement, okay? But my vibes are usually right here. A lot of people don't care about these movies. They care about all of the bullshit leading up to the movie. All of the sports team concepts when it comes to who's going to win, who's going to lose, culture war stuff, being racist towards people, being sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, generally bigoted towards anybody. They love that aspect of it. They don't care about these movies at all. Not in the least. That's what I believe. I could try and come up with a way to prove it. If I were backed into a corner, but I'm just going to say it for now.
Elliot Page ended up being cast as Sinon, a character who wasn't even in the Iliad or the Odyssey. As bad as that was, what made things worse was the perceived association Christopher...
Again, I want to point out these are adaptations of stories. So characters from other stories, from mythology or other poems or whatever, that are being added in to add more to this story, it's fine. It's not a one-for-one adaptation. And even if it were trying to be one-for-one, which version of it is it following? Which version of the story? Which version of the translation?
For Nolan's The Odyssey had with Emily Wilson's feminist translation of Homer's work. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our brothers and sisters who are history enthusiasts who were pointing out the inaccuracy of the...
No one really gives a fuck. The box office proves that nobody cares about this shit, bro. Nobody cares about whether or not a sword actually existed during this time. It's a mythological story. Took place 3,000 years ago. I want to go and have a good time. As long as they're not riding around in cars and they have smartphones, I don't care. And I don't think the general audience cares. Now, of course, if you're somebody that loves this shit and you care about it, like you individually care about it, that's fine. But when I say no one cares, I mean the general audience doesn't give a shit about this. They just want to go in and be entertained. It is a mythological story with a giant fucking cyclops. So all of this is so fucking try-hard. It's try-hard bro shit. Ain't nobody got time for this, man.
Armor and, I don't know, the Viking ship that apparently identifies as a Greek ship. And then there's the overall Hollywood hypocrisy of an industry that is absolutely obsessed with identity, yet they ignored the identity of the country of origin of Homer's poem, Greece.
So now you give a shit about this. This is the angle. Now you give a shit about Greek people. I probably watched 8 to 10 videos of Nerdrotic talking about this. I watched his interview with Piers Morgan. You weren't out here advocating for Greek people. And even in this video, you ain't really been advocating for Greek people. At the very beginning, you said the red flags were the castings of people of color and a trans person. You never said the red flags were they didn't cast any Greek people. So miss me with this performative bullshit. This is so fucking performative. You don't care about Greek people not being in the movie. You never did from the beginning. And now that the movie's come out, and I've been saying for probably 2 months now, y'all don't give a shit about the Greek people. You haven't made one video about it. Yeah, here's the thumbnail. The Odyssey, an epic disappointment. What do you have on the cover of this thumbnail? You have Matt crying because he's the victim. He's the victim in all of this, right? He's upset because he was in a movie that I guess broke a bunch of records, did really well this weekend. People seem to love it, but he's crying for some reason. And what reason is it? Oh, it's putting the black person, a person of color, and a trans person on the other side facing off against him. Is there any sort of like complaint about Greek people not being in the movie here? Since that's such a big fucking deal to you? Why is there a character wearing a 7-Eleven shirt? Why is that? It's just so fucking racist. It really is. It's just racism. It's racist bullshit. You don't care about Greek people. But let's jump back over here and hear you pretend to. I want to hear your concern trolling about Greek people.
Hypocrisy that was best exemplified in 2 separate posts from Variety on X, the first one of which Moana creatives on working closely to honor Polynesian culture and traditions and why representation matters.
Right.
Yet it appears that Variety completely forgot.
So now you care about representation. Can only gay people play gay characters? Is that something you would agree with? That only trans people can play trans characters. We shouldn't have people playing interchangeable with other races or backgrounds or whatever. No, that's not your position. It's never been your position. So now you're trying to hold the movie up to a position that you don't even hold, that the movie itself never claimed to hold. Nobody behind the movie ever claimed to hold this position. Christopher Nolan never said that. He never said, hey, it's going to be 100% accurate to Greek culture. He never said that. So you're building a straw man based on an article about Moana.
That just a month earlier, when people were genuinely asking why doesn't representation matter in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, they clap back with, these are just trolls who have a silly and wildly inaccurate argument. And just like...
Yes, because at that point in time, it wasn't about Greek people. It was about all the arguments about black people. You are so disingenuous. Here's the article, The Odyssey, why Elon Musk and his troll army attacks aren't just silly, but wildly inaccurate. Yes, Elon Musk, when he was sending people after this movie to try and discredit the movie and discredit Christopher Nolan, was not about Greek representation. In recent days, Twitter trolls have formed a phalanx and pointed their soresis squarely at The Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's $250 million adaptation of Homer's epic scheduled to hit cinemas July 17th. They have not actually seen the film yet, mind you, but have nevertheless managed to work themselves into a lather over a pair of castings, though Page's character isn't even confirmed yet. Elliot Page as Achilles' ghost and Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy. It was not about Greek representation. That was not the article. The straw man doesn't make sense, and that's the reason why you didn't show what the article was actually about, and you just read the headline. It's bullshit.
Like that, the Odyssey dived headfirst into the culture war. There were criticisms from many, including Elon Musk, and the unthinkable happened. A Christopher Nolan film was ratioed on YouTube.
And how did that work out for the movie? How did the ratio, please tell me, I'm very curious, how this ratio worked out for the movie, Mr. Nerdrotic. I'm very curious if these 574,000 fake dislikes from a fake add-on that doesn't accurately count these dislikes, explain to me how this affected the general audience and the box office of the opening weekend of the Odyssey. Please, I'm begging you. Explain to me how this matters, how any of this matters.
Leading many to believe that this film would be a flop based on everything they've seen from Hollywood over the last 10 years. Eventually, the corporate critics and influencers were allowed to see the film, and unsurprisingly, the corporate critics and influencers overwhelmingly love it.
By the way, the corporate critics line, that's him trying to discredit them because they don't have anything, guys. They don't have anything. They're not holding any cards here. The movie did well at the box office. Critics loved it. Fans have loved it. It's getting good word of mouth. It's going to have a good weekend next weekend. They have nothing. This is so desperate. This is so fucking desperate. Can't wait for Critical Drinker's video.
And once again, I'm going to have to differ with the corporate critics and maybe most of humanity because I was overwhelmingly whelmed with the Odyssey. I wish I could tell you that the questionable casting, considering how little they were in the film, didn't affect my suspension of disbelief, or the red flags from that questionable casting weren't a sign of a story that will deconstruct the hero, or this film wasn't affected by modernity and influenced by Emily Wilson's translation. Christopher.
So the thing is, you keep saying these red flags like it's a big issue. Like for you personally, that's one thing, but you have a YouTube channel where you get on your videos and you're like, oh, these things are a problem. You have influence over your audience, which, as I said before, I believe a big chunk of them were not going to see this movie anyway. They don't give a fuck about the movie. So let's not pretend this is like, oh, me and my bros were going out and these were red flags for me. It is what it is. No, bro, this is what you do for a living. This is your job. You flop watch. You outrage farm for a living. Stand on business. Take the fucking L. Take the L. When Supergirl underperformed, I was like, yeah, it underperformed. Yep. Sucks. But it did, right? Take the L. I want you to take the L in this video. I want you to admit that all of this bullshit doesn't mean anything. I want you to admit it. But you won't, because admitting it would give away your media grift.
Nolan's The Odyssey is a mythological tale that has been grounded into dirt, and it turns out a lot of people's concerns were completely justified. I would call it bullet point plot now.
Justified in what way? Justification would mean that there is some sort of material proof that these things were a problem, right? Not subjectively. We're not talking about subjectively. Subjective opinions don't mean shit, really, when we're talking about whether or not a piece of media is successful or not, right? It doesn't mean anything in today's world. This is not how these guys operate. These guys operate on three things: critic scores, fan scores, box office. That's it. Don't let them trick you into thinking it's anything else, because it's not. It is simply not. It is upon you to be honest to the people that are watching this review. And you can't even do that here. You're saying that all of these things were justified. In what way? I want you to articulate for me how I can look at it and go, yes, these red flags were justified because of this happening. That's what I need you to do.
Maybe this is just me, but I was expecting a grand sweeping adventure that would be immersive and, hey, a little fun, because Nolan is capable of that, all while being thoughtful. What I ended up seeing was a 3-hour drama that felt both rushed and too long at the same time.
If you read The Odyssey and you thought The Odyssey wasn't some sort of drama and it was going to be all action and shit like a Marvel movie, I don't know what to tell you. maybe go back and read it again. Like for the first time.
And while there were some good scenes that we will get to, they are far and few between and mostly surrounded by exposition dumps of people saying really obvious things. And as far as the immersion goes, well, this mythological tale that is set at a specific time in a specific region feels very modern. And instead of an adventure, you get a slow plotting drama that is a study in loss, regret, and PTSD, which is a bit of a surprise considering the editing for this film, because Chris Nolan has taken his trademark non-linear storytelling and dialed it up to 11. The film opens up with Travis Scott's The Bard doing some slam poetry recounting the fall of Troy, and then we're immediately into our first flashback where Elliot Page's Sinan is waddling across a beach and then getting killed in front of the Trojan horse. And no, Elliot Page's Sinan isn't just some pity-casting insignificant cameo. Elliot serves as a bookend to the story of sorts.
Okay, so what's the issue? How did either of those things prove with the box office or with the general audience? How can you prove those things were a negative? Just telling me they're in the movie isn't a negative. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, there's in your kitchen, there's pizza and there's hamburgers. Okay, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like you have to explain to me why these things are bad. Because right now you're just telling me they exist. Travis Scott opens the movie. Got it. Slam poetry. Whatever. Elliot Page's character gets killed in the beginning. Okay, cool. Cool. Why are these bad things? Why is this a problem for you?
It wouldn't be possible for me to recount even a basic plot synopsis in the order that Christopher Nolan told it, which would take at the very least a spreadsheet and at most 1,000 yards of yarn and pushpins. I'll try to keep this as linear as possible because I'm not kidding. We have multiple perspectives recounting stories where we get flashbacks within the recounted stories. I am aware this is how Odysseus recounts his journey in the poem. I'm also aware that this is a technique that has worked very well for Nolan in the past, but it doesn't.
Okay, so you want it to be true to the source material, except when you don't want it to be true to the source material. So a minute ago, there were no Greek people. That was the problem. It's too modern. That's the problem. But here you're like, oh, but this thing, this really important part of the story, which is the structure of the story, I want them to change this and make it, dare I say, more updated, more modern. That's really interesting. So you argue for modernity in some regards, but you say it's a problem in another, but you don't really articulate why it's a problem. You just don't like it. Not liking something and it being an actual issue that affects the movie are two different things.
Work very well here. And apologies for any possible spoilers for an almost 3,000-year-old story. Odysseus, played by
Matt Damon,
is stranded on an island and tripping balls on the lotus flower with the mysterious nymph Calypso, played by a 60-year-old woman with plastic surgery. And unless you read Homer's Odyssey, Calypso will remain a mystery because they give...
Why do we care the age of the woman or that she has plastic surgery? What kind of fucking... Are we watching a fantasy story? Are we watching a mythology? I don't usually take this bait because it's dumb. It's just dumb bro shit. Comments like that. But it's just crazy to me that we're watching a movie that you want it to be fantastical. You want it to have all of these crazy elements, but you don't like the fact that a woman in the movie is 60 and has a little bit of plastic surgery, which, by the way, I don't even know if she does. It could just be Botox or something. I don't know. But you have an issue with that, but you want more like fantastic elements. None of this makes sense.
Absolutely no characterization or background on her. She's just woman on an island while Odysseus...
Okay, so first issue, not Matt Damon as Odysseus, but the first woman, the black guy and the trans person, those are all issues. So already we have a problem with a woman, we have a problem with a black man, we have a problem with a trans man. But the white guy... absolutely fine. Nothing negative to say about him, I guess.
And trying to protect her son, Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, whose life is constantly in danger. And the only people in the kingdom that really believe Odysseus is still alive is Penelope, Telemachus, the swineherder Aeneas, played by the Colombian John Leguizamo, and...
There we go. See? Like, the minute we get to someone who isn't white, we have to have a funny comment about them. It's not subliminal for me. I hear it. I see it whenever they're doing it. But other viewers are subjected to this, and they've been conditioned by these guys doing this in their videos. When they write these out, they're conditioning their audience, reminding them that there are certain targets by coming up with funny comments about them, little racist insults, sexist insults, whatever it might be. They do this because this is the audience they're trying to court.
Odysseus's dog Argus. Meanwhile, back on the island of Ogygia with Calypso, played by Charlize Theron, Odysseus, played by
Matt Damon,
starts to slowly recall his past after the 10-year war that led to the fall of Troy. Now, the Trojan horse and the sack of Troy loom like a shadow over the story and Odysseus. That's why Nolan made the decision to spread it throughout the film. And I was mostly okay with this until you get to the end and learn that it looms like a shadow over the film, because it's all about how it's interpreted, and we'll get to that. But after the sack, as Agamemnon makes his way home, Odysseus takes a slower route where he occasionally runs into Athena, played by Zendaya. And I have to point out, unlike
Zendaya.
Lupita Nyong'o playing Clytemnestra and Helen of Troy, Elliot Page playing Sinon, and this guy playing H-1B Greek. Credit where credit is due. Within the story, they do explain why Athena looks like this, and that's another thing we'll get to in just a bit. Now, before we get to one of my favorite parts of the movie, I want to give you my favorite scene when these two guys announce themselves as Greek soldiers.
We're Greeks from Ithaca.
No, you're not. And here I was thinking there wasn't any levity in this film. But this brings us to the Odyssey portion of the Odyssey, which is the 10-year journey from Troy to Ithaca, which is about the middle third of the movie. And outside of the horrific casting, this is the biggest question I had for this movie from the get-go. How will Christopher Nolan deal with gods and monsters? Since everybody's going to bring it up, I know how Troy handled them. They didn't. But there are monsters, starting with the giant cyclops Polymephus, which did look cool. This is exactly what I came to this movie to see. Unfortunately, despite the very impressive practical effects, it still felt a little flat, including there being no conversation.
Which is interesting because, I mean, like you say, you came to the movie to see that. If you've read the Odyssey, you know the Odyssey, especially a Nolan version of the Odyssey, isn't going to be this nonstop action story. It's just not the story.
Conversation between Odysseus and the Cyclops, and no use of the name Nobody and no other Cyclops. Just in case you're not familiar with the story, the Nobody thing is kind of important. So in the poem, Odysseus gets the Cyclops drunk. He asks Odysseus what's his name. He responds with Nobody. So when Odysseus is stabbing him in the eye and Polymephus is crying out for the other Cyclops and they ask who is harming you, he responds with Nobody. Nolan said he tried to put it in, but it just wouldn't work. And again, it looked fantastic. And this is one of the few supernatural monster scenes that Nolan actually spent time on, where by the end you actually feel sorry for the Cyclops. And I did like that bit, but this is where I started noticing a major omission from Odysseus's character, because in the story, he's kind of famous for being cheeky. Instead, we get a very somber and serious Odysseus in a very somber and serious film.
All right, so I've listened to these guys complain about injecting humor into everything, right? When Supergirl came out, the jokes were the problem. They wanted it to be more serious, right? They wanted the story to feel more real, more believable because of the Marvel and MCU humor, as they would say. But here they're asking for Christopher Nolan to take a story that he has turned into like this epic drama and put jokes in it. Okay. All right. So now you guys want humor in serious epic fantasies.
But now Odysseus and his crew are cursed to wander the sea for years because they harmed the son of Poseidon. And their next stop is not the floating island of Aeolia. That was left out with a lot of other stuff. No, it's the Lystragonians, the land of bloodthirsty cannibal giants. Now, we didn't necessarily see them being cannibals, and they weren't necessarily giants, but they were big and in steel-plated armor in the Bronze Age, but I don't have a problem with their look. It kind of reminds me of the lore of the remnants of a pre-Diluvian advanced civilization. I don't know if it was supposed to be funny, but it was, and it played out something like this. While it was good, I would say pump the brakes on the overpraise. Now, every stop Odysseus and what's left of his crew makes is for provisions. This time, the crew is pissed off enough to tell Odysseus to stay.
I really wish that I didn't have to sit through entire recaps of movies with these guys. Your reviews don't have to be this. That's the big thing. Like, a review doesn't need you to spoil the entire movie, regardless of whether or not it's a 3,000-year-old poem or not. It doesn't need you to spoil the entire movie for you to make jokes about little scenes in the movie. You don't have to do that. This is not just, he doesn't, like Critical Drinker does this. So many of these guys do this. They do these reviews that are just recaps with like bad humor in them. That's all these are. I've actually considered jumping ahead, but then I'm like, he might say something dumb that I need to call out during this segment. It's so frustrating.
Back as they go up and talk to Cersei. And as they walk up to her house, they see a lot of docile predators like lions and cheetahs and discarded armor. Nothing suspicious there. And this leads into what is my favorite moment and scene in the film, at least in the beginning. Cersei feeds the crew and they just start eating savagely, and then she eventually turns them all into pigs. It's both gruesome and cool. It is a genuine horror scene, and this is one of the few times in the film where the music actually fits. But as what happens a lot in the Odyssey, the resolution is a bit rushed. Of course.
By the way, I want to point out a lot of this is also subjective. I don't care if he doesn't like the music. I don't care about these things. Like, none of these things really matter. Like, you're trying to prove that there were red flags. I've been waiting for you to sort of articulate an argument or give me some actual solid proof that these red flags are resulting in something negative for the movie. You haven't done that. You've literally skipped over it, bro. These guys think that everything is attached to their culture war shit. Not everything is about you.
Masculinity. You know, the good old misunderstood female antagonist. Odysseus apologizes for his men's toxic masculinity and gets directions to Hades, where Odysseus once again runs into the shade of Elliot Page's Sinon. And this is where it becomes very hard to argue that this was simply just a brief and insignificant cameo and pity casting, or stunt casting as.
Why would it be that? Because Elliot's trans? Oh, it's got to be a pity casting, fam. Must be a pity casting. Has to be a cameo. No way they would give Elliot Page a proper role in this movie. Did they ever come out and say they pity casted Elliot Page? No. No one ever said that. This is a fucking argument that you've made. You're like, oh, this argument that I made, this claim that I made because we know inside people, actually we were wrong. Shocker.
Some would call it. Despite the 5+ minutes of screen time, Elliot Page's Sinon turns out to be a significant character. Christopher Nolan chose to take a character who wasn't even in the Iliad or the Odyssey, deliberately change their story because Sinon did know the Greek soldiers were in the Trojan horse in a completely different poem, and then cast Sinon as Elliot Page, making
and it's his movie. You act like it's like they're not allowed to do that. I guess legally under the bro code, the incel code of the internet, you can't combine stories together to make a new story. Like,
Sinon, one of the few good honorable men in this story, where Sinon is both a symbol of Odysseus's shame and part of his motivation to go home, to seek retribution against what is the leader of the suitors, Robert Pattinson's Antinous. If terrorizing his wife Penelope and son Telemachus wasn't enough. In other words, it's really hard to argue that this wasn't subversive casting meant.
It's really hard to argue. Let's run this back.
If terrorizing his wife Penelope and son Telemachus wasn't enough. In other words, it's really hard to argue that this wasn't subversive casting meant to be provocative. One could argue.
What? Wait a minute for a second. So basically you are shifting the burden of proof, right? You're not saying you have proof that it was subversive casting. Like, you're not saying that you know for sure that they cast this character to create controversy. You're like shifting that burden onto someone else, saying, now you have to disprove this thing. So now we have to argue against a position that you do not have actual evidence or proof of. It's a rhetorical shield. Quite literally. You're shifting that burden over to someone to prove a negative. That's quite literally dumb as fuck. It's dumb as fuck. Let's hear that one more time so you guys understand. He's asking you to disprove something that he has not actually given us proof of.
Penelope and son Telemachus wasn't enough. In other words, it's really hard to argue that this wasn't subversive casting meant to be provocative. One could argue Christopher Nolan is known for bringing back actors that he likes, and I would argue that both things can be true, because you'll have a hard time convincing me that Elliot Page was cast on their acting prowess. And
so you're saying one could argue, who is this person? Where is this information coming from? You're quite literally building an argument out of nothing, because you're going, one would argue, meaning who knows, but your opinion is this thing. So you're building your argument against no one? You can't prove that Elliot was hired because they're doing some sort of like provocative thing here with the casting. But then you flip it around and you're like, oh, but you know, Christopher Nolan is known for working with people that he's worked with before, people that he highly regards. But I'm just going to throw all of that aside and say two things can be true at once, even though the thing that you're suggesting you have no proof of. And you've tried to shift that blame on someone else to disprove a thing that you don't have proof of. It's all a feeling, bro. It's all a vibe.
That dominated their time in the underworld, taking away screen time from the brilliant James Remar's Tiresias, the Blind Prophet. And we didn't get to see Odysseus interact with the shades of Achilles, Ajax, his mother, all of whom I would have much rather.
Right. And they got rid of all of that specifically because they wanted to subvertly cast Elliot Page. So all of the story elements that Christopher Nolan could have done that you think were superior were tossed aside to stick a trans person in a role for what reason? You would have to tell me what's at the end of the road, right? The math ain't mathin'. It doesn't make sense. So I'm supposed to believe that Christopher Nolan, this incredible director who isn't beholden to the whims of Hollywood, he runs Hollywood. This guy, this incredible director that has done so many fantastic films over the years, decided to throw story out completely, elements that you think would have been superior, even though you're not Christopher Nolan and you're not an acclaimed writer at all, but you think these elements were superior. He threw it all out to give a role to Elliot Page, according to you, because apparently I can't disprove it, even though you can't prove it, to give this role to Elliot Page to be provocative and subversive. For what reason? What is the reason? Why would he do that? He's not a player in the Hollywood DEI games that you guys accuse everybody of being. There's absolutely no proof of that. So once you've established there is no proof of that, how do we ring back around to Elliot Page being cast to subvert the movie? To be provocative. How do we get there? And then once we're there, what's the problem? What is it leading to? What is Elliot Page as a trans person in this movie? What does this represent in the movie, since Elliot's not playing a trans person in the movie? So it's not about trans representation in the story. It seems like Elliot was playing the ghost of a cisgender person, meaning that there was no talk about being trans or, you know, how it is to live as a trans person. None of that is there. So it's a character that is simply played by a trans person. So I need for you in this video, when I hit play, to tell us why, make it very clear what the negative is for casting Elliot Page in this role and what harm it leads to and why Christopher Nolan did it. That's what I need to hear from you.
Scene, then seeing Sinan whine about being lied to. Now, when I originally heard about this scene, I suspected that Sinan might be playing a proxy for the Shade of Achilles, but in truth, Sinan is playing a proxy for Elpenor, another male character that Elliot Page was rumored to play. Odysseus does encounter the Shade of Agamemnon, who informs him that he was...
So there's no harm. This is the shit I'm talking about. There's no harm provided for why there's an issue with Elliot being this character. Oh, it was played by a man. This character's a male. Okay. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? Is it a storyline in the movie where A character that was traditionally a male character is now being played by a trans man, and that trans man has turned this character into a trans allegory or something that could sort of articulate the typical arguments you guys use. Because you keep saying that trans representation, the trans flag, trans people existing as trans people in movies, turning characters trans, all of these things, these are the problems. But here, we've shifted it a little bit. So now you have a trans person playing a cisgender person where there is no transness even mentioned anywhere in the story, and you still have a problem with it. Do you see why the fuck people call that transphobic? Because there's absolutely no reason to be upset about it for any other reason, considering the character that Elliot is playing. I don't think there's any reason to argue that a trans person cannot play any character they want to play in a movie. As long as the director and the writer sees it for them, then fucking do it, right? I don't think they should receive any hate for that. But here, you have simply just fallen onto the concept that a trans person is in a movie, and that is a problem. That's it. That's crazy. I want to point out a lot of this stuff is subjective. I'm not going to correct him on subjective stuff. Even if it's dumb as shit, unless I'm going to make a joke about it, I'm just going to let him finish.
Leguizamo did a commendable job stealing a part from a Greek actor, playing Odyssey.
Y'all, it can't be serious. It can't be serious. Clearly, we both heard what he just said. Clown energy.
Is his pal and swineherder AMS. Tom Holland did a great job playing Tom Holland, and I particularly...
Well, didn't he steal a job from a Greek actor too? John Bernthal stole a job from a Greek actor as well, right? You should have put that at the end of everybody's name.
Really like the scene when Spider-Man went to Sparta to meet the Punisher, who's married to Nakia from Black Panther. And yes, this is where we see Lupita Nyong'o playing Helen of Troy, who also plays her now twin sister, Clytemnestra. And while she is barely in the film, it is worth mentioning this is 100% stunt casting. They depict her as disfigured, insinuating that Frank Castle beat his wife.
Like, calling Lupita a stunt casting is crazy. That's crazy. I just want you to be clear. As talented as Lupita is, saying that she was hired as a stunt is ridiculous. Now the movie is out. All of a sudden, all of these subjective takes about the film are popping off. And none of the stuff they complained about has proven to be a problem. You know what I mean? Like all the stuff that was going to make the movie fail. None of that's been a problem. They keep saying it is, but they really haven't been able to prove that it is. So now they're just pedantically arguing about things. Like they make it seem like Christopher Nolan did a hack job with this movie. But we know that's not true.
Out is still a very mid film. One, in my humble opinion, is deeply subversive, which is
mid film. There we go. Concession. That is a concession, everyone. We're going to stop it there. He has conceded that he was wrong. That's what a mid film is for these guys. These guys don't live in the mid. They don't live in fence sitting. They don't, that's not where their feet lands in any of this. A movie is either a flop or it's a hit. The middle ground for these guys is quite literally them saying to all of us that they fucked up. Mid is a concession that they lost. Yet again, I love these videos. I love this shit. So congratulations, Nerdrotic, on just admitting that you guys played your hand and you completely played yourselves at the same time. This is crazy. I can't wait till the next weekend comes around, which, by the way, I do think they're going to shift to Avengers Doomsday content now. I don't know if Nerdrotic will do another video about this. I think this might be it. And then it's going to be all Marvel stuff because we got Comic-Con coming up. So they're going to move away from this because it's a losing battle for them. Mark my words. Well, actually, little addition to that. They're going to watch and see where the movie goes in terms of its total box office. So we might see another video about the box office at the end of its run, depending on where it is. If it does over $1 billion, they won't make another video. They absolutely won't. If it gets close to $1 billion, they probably won't. If it makes like 750, 800 million, they might not make another video.